Kia ora, welcome to episode 76 of the SWNZ Podcast, the podcast for New Zealand Star Wars fans. My name is Matt.
And my name is Christy.
It was another interesting week for news from a galaxy far, far away, and to be honest, we've got a little bit of catching up to do, so let's jump in and talk Star Wars. First up in today's roundup, I just want to remind everybody about the upcoming Music of John Williams in Concert event, an orchestral concert by Orchestra Auckland, which will be taking place at the Auckland Town Hall on October the 1st this year, featuring the music of John Williams. And we'll be hearing music from Star Wars, Harry Potter, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Schindler's List, Superman, Jurassic Park, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Tickets are available for this concert at ticketmaster.co.nz. We will have links down below. We're only a matter of days away from the first drop of episodes from the Andor streaming series, which will be kicking off this coming Wednesday with 3 episodes. That's on September the 21st in the evening New Zealand time. It will carry on through to episode 12, which should hit Disney Plus on November the 23rd. Season 2 of this will be filming later this year and will also be 12 episodes in length for a total of 24 episodes of Andor. It's only going to be 2 seasons long. The first season takes place between 5 and 4 years before the Battle of Yavin, so it spans about a year, starting 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, including some flashbacks, of course, to Andor's younger years. Each bundle of 3 episodes of Season 2 will span a year, ultimately leading directly into Rogue One. This information has been confirmed by Andor creator Tony Gilroy in the Empire magazine, so that's an interesting structure. Continuous timeline for Season 1 and then a bit of a jumpy timeline, but leading directly into Rogue One. All the trailers and TV spots that we've seen so far have really made me want to watch Rogue One again. I'm not sure if it's going to be best to watch it before or after the run of episodes, to be honest, but maybe even both.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of trailers. They're really amping this one up. We got a 9-minute sneak peek on Disney Plus Day, which was fun. We weren't really expecting too much there. And of course, they're putting out lots of clips and snippets on YouTube and social media. So they're really amping this one up. And to be honest, it's working. I am so excited for this.
Yeah, it's a good length, 12 episodes. One thing to note though, what we've heard so far is that the episodes are maybe a shade shorter than some of the Mandalorian ones, so it's good that we're getting 3 episodes to start with, because that will really give us a lot of story to get in. Some of the episodes are sort of in the 35 to 40 minute zone, but we'll get at least an hour and a half on the first night. That will really get us well into the story and leave us wanting more, I am sure. As we've talked about in previous podcasts, we're expecting this series to have quite a different feel from some of the other ones. It has been filmed largely on location, not so much using the stagecraft technology that features in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. Creator and writer Tony Gilroy has explained why stagecraft was not used so much for the series. In the Empire magazine, he said, "Yep, we're old school. We didn't use stagecraft at all. It's a choice that looks set to add even more grit and earthiness to a series all about capturing that texture, set at a time when the Star Wars galaxy is a particularly dark and dangerous place to be." Separately on a press tour, he did just clarify that statement by saying that nobody's against the volume per se. The volume is fantastic for the things that it is designed for. However, Andor is just on a massively epic scale and people would be running off the set all the time. So yeah, I think that just speaks to the way this is probably going to have quite a bit of a different feel, and I'm looking forward to that scale in some ways.
Yes. And I think because this one ties so closely into Rogue One, they wanted to have a very similar feel. And of course, Rogue One was all set in physical locations, physical sets and things like that. The Mandalorian was new, so you could start from scratch. It could have its own flavor and have its own feel. And it's a little bit more tightly centered on one character and his adventures. So the locations are all, the Mandalorian has sort of a quietness to him. He's not constantly speaking all the time. Certainly in the moments with Grogu, he's not talking lots and lots. So it has a sort of quietness, which works for sort of a still sort of camera sort of style where you're sort of centered on a central character. So like they said in Rogue One, where you've got explosions and people running and stormtroopers and things like that, it's too constrained to do that on such a small set, because yes, you can build huge sets indoors in a controlled environment, but the volume is a very specific size. They haven't really gone to the full scale that you can do within sort of sound stages and that. I'm sure that technology will expand to sort of completely sort of encompass a huge sort of standard sized soundstage, but at this point it's more small. So that makes perfect sense. And I like his explanation that it wasn't a diss to the technology. It's just that it wasn't really the fit for his style.
Yeah. So Tony Gilroy, as I say, he is the creator and writer of the Andor series. He's been talking quite a bit, and there's other comments that he's made that give us a bit of information about what to expect from Andor. Tony Gilroy is also famous for working on the Jason Bourne films. He wrote the screenplays for the first 4 of that series, as well as directed the Bourne Legacy. And in an interview with the Total Film magazine, he discussed how the Bourne franchise inspired his work on this upcoming Star Wars show. He said, "I've been trying to get people to make an acoustic action movie because action movies had gotten so bombastic in the 80s. They were just enormous. So when Bourne came along, we went way down. It was about making it real, keeping someone you really understand and really care about in a place that you understand the geography of. It's much more involving than a guy on a train with 15 machine guns and a helicopter coming down." That aesthetic, that idea does carry on over to Andor because we are on the ground with these people, so everything we do has an intimacy and an acoustic nature to it within the grandeur of Star Wars.
That description feels like it fits a lot with the sort of the initial approach to filming Star Wars, sort of trying to do things in a sort of a gritty, real, following characters, doing a lot of practical things with sets and special effects. So I think it's a good fit because obviously Rogue One is the one that the franchise and the kind of timeline that fits the closest into the very original A New Hope Star Wars film. So I feel like because it links up almost, within minutes with the end of Rogue One to A New Hope, I feel like it needs to match stylistically. Yeah. So I feel like this is a really good approach.
Yeah, and we've previously watched Rogue One and A New Hope back to back, and I've got a feeling we'll be doing that again in the very near future. So the Andor trailer came out on Disney Plus Day, which was September the 8th, and there's quite a bit of other information about upcoming Star Wars shows as well. I'm sure you've all seen the Andor trailer by now, as well as the previously released teaser. They also released the Season 3 Mandalorian trailer, which Season 3 of The Mandalorian is scheduled for a 2023 release, we now know. That was a bit of a recut of material that was previously shown at Celebration but not revealed to the public. So we see a lot. We see The Mandalorian, we see Grogu, we see Bo-Katan, lots of other Mandalorians. And we've also confirmed that Giancarlo Esposito will be returning as Moff Gideon. He made an appearance on stage at D23, even though he doesn't show up in the trailer per se.
Yeah, I think showing him in a trailer would be too spoilery. I think he's such a good character, a good villain for the show. I didn't want to sort of just have him be captured and that's just sort of the last you see of him. I think that's not quite as a satisfactory ending. I hope that the Empire, frees him from the Republic in some manner. He escapes or whatever, and he's still, because obviously he has big plans with Grogu. We still don't know completely what we're seeing. We do see the scientist in the trailer.
Yes, true.
So I want to see where, I want to see a little bit of that trailing sort of off. We didn't get a lot of it in season 2, but we know that there was, an intent there. The Empire had some plan for Grogu and his biological material, as it were, blood or midichlorians or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And I want to see Moff Gideon continue with that. This
trailer implies that the season's going to focus on the Mandalorian story arc, but there is that underlying what was the Empire doing with cloning and looking for blood from a Force-sensitive individual and so forth. So that is definitely going on in the background and needs to be resolved as part of the bigger picture.
Because that's still a threat, that Grogu is a sort of a hunted individual. He is sought after and stuff like that. And I like that being a sort of a source of tension, and it works well because obviously he needs a bodyguard of sorts with the Mandalorian. So very exciting trailer. A little bit of a disappointment that it's not going to be screening at the end of the year, but I'm sure we won't have too much to wait.
No, well, I'll talk about the whole release schedule very, very shortly. But there's a number of other titles that were talked about on Disney Plus Day that we got a little bit more information about. Skeleton Crew, which we now know is just wrapping up its filming. It's coming to the end of its filming cycle. So it's actually moved to production quite fast. Now, this was one of the titles that's only been a little bit more recently announced, along with Tales of the Jedi. It wasn't part of that original bundle of upcoming Star Wars material that we heard about from the marketing department a year or so back. But it seems to have been moved along quite well. It's starring Jude Law as the lead adult character, and it's going to feature a number of younger characters, humans and humanoid children, who are on a bit of an adventure through the galaxy trying to find their way home, having become lost somehow, as a sort of a high-level overview of that story. Interesting trivia about this series, it's got about a $136 million budget, apparently, which per episode, we don't have an exact episode count, but we're expecting 6 to 8, which makes it quite a high budget per episode compared to some other material that's going out these days. And yeah, it's quite interesting that they put that much money into a series, but you'll see why in a second when I just mention a little bit of its backstory. John Watts, who is famous for his involvement with Spider-Man, directing a number of the Spider-Man films. Jon Favreau spoke to John Watts on the set of Spider-Man film about directing an episode of The Mandalorian, but Watts, one way or another, apparently had a fully formed idea for his own show. So the conversation between John Watts and Jon Favreau led directly to the development of the Skeleton Crew series quite rapidly, which I think is kind of interesting. Jude Law has talked about Skeleton Crew publicly. He said it was such an important part of growing up, the impact of that film and that world, talking about Star Wars obviously. The way it penetrated and exploded my imagination. There are 1 or 2 more times every day where I'm walking on set and it hits me like a child. I get awestruck by certain characters that are around me, and that I can't say much more.
It's kind of interesting that this one seems to have been fast-tracked so quickly. When we think back to that original lineup, there are ones like Lando and the Droid series and things like that that have kind of petered out. Even Rogue Squadron, these sort of projects that were announced with big fanfare, and then they've just kind of fizzled out, and we don't really know where they're going to go. And then other times they keep things completely secret, and then they're like, huzzah, this thing's done. You're going to be seeing it soon. And it's always kind of like curious why Lucasfilm / Disney takes this sort of approach that they don't keep everything secret until it's actually filmed and actually done, so that they don't sort of bait and switch fans. Yeah. It's almost tiring a little bit, keeping track of what's coming up, what's cancelled, what's on hold, what are we looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, fans will be familiar with Skeleton Crew by now, but the general person on the street, the general Disney Plus subscriber, will have no idea what you're talking about if you talk about Skeleton Crew.
Because it doesn't necessarily sound Star Warsy in its title either.
So you're missing an opportunity there. And speaking of that sort of messy release schedule, Bad Batch 2 finally has a confirmed release date. It was actually expected by now, a few months back, in fact, was its original release date. It got bumped a few times. We now know that Bad Batch Season 2 will be coming out on January the 4th, 2023. 16 episodes with a 2-episode premiere. That gives us 6 weeks between Andor's last episode and the first episode of Bad Batch Season 2 that we'll just have to fill with other material. But there is other material to fill that with. I'm looking forward to Bad Batch Season 2. We've had the trailer for a little while. There's a few snippets in that trailer that give us a feel where it's going. One of the Clone Force 99, I think, says something along the lines, I can't remember if it's Hunter or one of the others, says that there are others out there that need our help. That kind of implies that they are out there looking for other clones that are lost without a place in the galaxy, and with the evolution of the Empire into the Stormtrooper era and so forth. And I think that's going to be an interesting arc to delve into.
I'm sure they're never going to give us an explanation as to why it was delayed so many months from the sort of initial penciled-in release schedule. I don't know whether they are sort of tweaking things to fit in with something else, whether they're going to have it like crossover with something else. We're going to see some sort of crossover event and they're like, actually, we don't want to spoil that, let's leave that. Or whether they decided to like add on some episodes or something like that, or they wanted to change something in the production line. They're like, oh, actually, we're going to do this. And then they sort of had to scrap some ideas and keep working on it and stuff like that. But either way, we've finally got a date. Very excited. I'm really enjoying the Bad Batch. It's kind of been one of those ones where I wasn't sure how much we needed to see more stories from the perspective of clone troopers. We get a lot of that in the Clone Wars. And so I wasn't really sure how interested I would be in this. I wasn't sure if it was going to end up being a bit like Resistance. They were going to sort of stretch it out to 1 or 2 seasons and then it would just sort of fizzle out. But I'm really enjoying Bad Batch and I'm just eagerly waiting the next episodes.
Some good products. There's some good merchandising associated with it. There's something about a team of clones that just lends itself to product marketing, to figures, Funko Pop vinyl figures, Black Series figures and so forth. We've had some cool figures from Obi-Wan, but they just haven't, they haven't really called out to me in quite the same way that trying to get a full set of Clone Trooper Bad Batch figures did in the previous months.
They obviously hit just the right sort of balance with sort of new characters and sort of familiar ones with the likes of Echo and things like that. And the design of them, the personality traits, and just the detail, they're keeping up with the Clone Wars style, but sort of amping it up a little bit, like Clone Wars Season 7 and The Bad Batch, they're getting a little bit better with the animation style, possibly because they've got a Disney budget behind it and trying to push stuff out for Disney Plus. They give them a bigger budget so they can do the detail, but it's just really reading quite well. It's quite people have always talked about the animation style in Clone Wars sort of being quite elevated. And I think it was such a shame that they decided to go with a sort of simplified version of animation for Resistance, and even to a certain respect in Rebels. I know people sort of now hold up Clone Wars as kind of like the pinnacle of the style and detail of Star Wars animation. And I think, hopefully, that Disney and Lucasfilm have seen that if you're going to do animation, it's got to come up to that level. And hopefully with the likes of Disney Plus really pushing new content, that any further Star Wars animated shows will fit. There doesn't necessarily need to be the same style, but that sort of same detail level. The animation style in Resistance really did give a children's vibe, and I think a lot of people just didn't take it quite as seriously, and I think it just kind of fizzled out on the fact that just no one really bought into it.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance you need to hit, particularly with representing aliens and clones and so forth. Clone Wars has set a benchmark, and it's not by accident. It did evolve over time a little bit to the point where people really could take it seriously, and I think that's a signal moving forward that they need to take on board. And I think they are, because let's talk about the other animated series that's coming out, Tales of the Jedi, which premieres on October the 26th. So not actually that far away. This is going to be 6 short episodes all dumped in one hit. The 6 episodes involves 2 stories spanning 3 episodes each that sort of have a bit of a parallel feel to them. Apparently the tagline for this series is 2 stories of fate, 1 destiny. So one cluster of the episodes features the story of Dooku and his Padawan, a young Qui-Gon Jinn, and involves Mace Windu as well. And the other cluster of stories features the story of Ahsoka and Anakin Skywalker and their interaction as Master and Padawan.
Yeah, well, obviously in the tagline talking about one destiny, that Dooku and Ahsoka are one of the very few Jedi that have ever left the Jedi Order. We get a glimpse of this in episode 2 when Obi-Wan is looking at the busts at the sort of the Jedi archives, and Jocasta Nu sort of comes to help him with his quest to find Kamino, but the expanded universe of the time kind of described the fact that these are busts of Jedi that have left the Order, and there's sort of about 20, depending on, sort of the count. And so that's a pretty small number of Jedi that have ever left, not necessarily turned to the dark side, as we know does eventually happen with Dooku. We don't necessarily know whether he, like with the new storylines, we don't know whether that's sort of decided that he went dark side and left the Jedi because he turned to the dark side, or whether he becomes disillusioned with the Jedi in the way that Ahsoka did. Ahsoka doesn't fall to the dark side and leave the Jedi.
No.
She leaves for a very specific reason. And so I think it's interesting that we're sort of pulling some threads there.
I think the Dooku story is going to be even more interesting to delve into than the Ahsoka one, because we know a fair amount about her story arcs. We're going to see a little bit more behind the scenes that wasn't featured in the Clone Wars, but the Dooku story arc, I think it's really, really going to be fun to explore. And of course, notable is that Qui-Gon Jinn will be voiced by Liam Neeson in that series of shorts.
Like, we've got some, obviously, the novels around the episode 2 era and a little bit of episode 3 would have delved into Dooku and a little bit of the sort of the story around him and stuff like that. But we've got this kind of Disney reset. So we don't know if they'll decide to play around with that and create what they want to be the sort of new version of Dooku.
Setting the canon in stone, and also just making it deliverable to the people who aren't reading novels and other material.
So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they play it. I'm really looking forward to this. It's a shame they describe it as shorts. I don't know whether that just means that it's not a series. I'm kind of hoping these are like 20, 30-minute episodes, sort of like Clone Wars-esque, because the animation obviously matches very closely to Clone Wars. We've got Ahsoka looking very much like her, because it's set in the Clone Wars era, Ahsoka's story, so she is exactly as we see her in those latter episodes of the original Clone Wars series.
Are you disappointed if they're shorter than 10 minutes each? I'm hoping for at least an hour out of this series, and that would be fine. It may be a shade more, but a minimum of an hour would be what I'd be hoping for here. And just looking forward beyond all of that, Production Weekly, the trade publication, gives us a little bit of a hint that Mandalorian Season 4 will be filming from this point onward later in 2022, and Andor Season 2 is due to start production in November, so those things will be well underway by the end of the year. So just to recap, looking at some dates and titles in terms of scheduling on Disney Plus, September the 21st, this coming Wednesday, Andor kicks off its 12-episode run. October the 26th, so not that far down the line, Tales of the Jedi. All 6 short episodes will be dumped in one hit. January the 4th, early next year, Bad Batch Season 2. Also early 2023, no firm date yet. We'll be seeing Season 3 of The Mandalorian. We've seen the trailer for that, so we know that that's pretty much ready to go. Autumn, New Zealand autumn of 2023. Don't forget, Visions Volume 2 will be coming out, and that's something to look forward to if you're a fan of the first run of Visions material. Later in 2023, we're still hoping for Ahsoka. There's been a few casting announcements for that. That will be winter New Zealand time for Ahsoka, and spring 2023, so later in 2023, Skeleton Crew should be hitting Disney Plus. That's what we sort of understand is going to be the release schedule for now. Interesting thing, Disney Plus has sort of released a bit of a release, has revealed a bit of a release schedule of all of its titles over the next year or so, going through to 2024. And Rogue Squadron is no longer showing up on this list. So Rogue Squadron is the movie about X-Wing fighter pilots that has previously had a date as early as December the 22nd, 2023 to be released. Obviously, it hasn't even started production yet, so we've been assuming that that's being bumped down the line. Now it doesn't show up on Disney Plus's release schedule at all. This has been confirmed by Variety.com. So it hasn't been cancelled per se, but it's certainly been pushed far down the pipeline. So I wouldn't be expecting to see Rogue Squadron if it goes ahead before 2025 at this point.
Which is another example of sort of this constant switching around. They even had like a little bit of a teaser sort of snippet showing the director sort of, you know, getting on a flight suit and sort of walking up to an X-Wing and things like that. That was fun. That was exciting. You know, classic X-Wings. Real. It felt imminent, yeah, it felt like, oh, she's like on set. There's a prop and blah, blah, blah. You know, it gave the impression that things were moving. But it's just, it's hard to... It makes it hard as a fan to get excited about things if you don't know if they're actually going to come to fruition. I feel like with these announcements where they're like, oh, they announced the Game of Thrones writers were going to be working on a trilogy of movies, and then that got, you know, kicked to the curb. And, you know, Rian Johnson was going to be doing a trilogy. Taika, I wish that they would just keep these things secret until they're like, oh, it's filming, so we're going to announce a title.
Or at least
you know?
Until they've locked in some sort of production timelines with these directors and showrunners. We know the Rian Johnson trilogy is still on the cards, and Taika Waititi, of course, is actually one that's been talked about a little bit more. We just don't have a solid date. And we know, and I'm going to talk about Taika's, everything we know about Taika's very shortly, but I'll get to that because it's not actually one that's been talked about in this recent Disney Plus Day D23 Expo sort of reveal. So I'll circle back around to that very, very shortly. But speaking of Disney Plus, you've got a couple of days left. If you're not a Disney Plus subscriber, you've got a couple of days left to get in on the Disney Plus Day $1.99 for the first month sign-up offer, which is available until September the 20th. So you can get your first month of Disney Plus if you're a returning or not a current subscriber, and you're able to watch all of the currently available material, as well as a couple of pretty cool new behind-the-scenes releases that I'll just mention here. Obi-Wan Kenobi, A Jedi's Return, which was a Disney Plus Day premiere streamed on September the 8th. That was a behind-the-scenes look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and I really enjoyed that. It was about an hour long, and it really looked at Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen and even Liam Neeson, and having a bit of conversation about returning to play the characters that they've previously embodied.
I like the fact that Disney Plus has set a precedent with both the Marvel and Star Wars franchises where they put out, once it's all finished airing, they put out like a good hour-long sort of behind the scenes to really dive into it. The one thing that I had a quibble with this was the title. Releasing something called A Jedi's Return. It made it sound like a sequel, like they were announcing, because they were like, oh, it's going to be a Disney Plus Day premiere. I'm like, that sounds like Obi-Wan did well enough that you've like done a sequel or something like that. It doesn't necessarily sound like a behind the scenes. Their other one, they call it like Disney Gallery.
Yep.
You know, that's clearly, not
I don't know why they didn't follow that format, that naming format. But
it felt like a bit of a, like trying to get people to get all excited. And then I was like, oh, it's behind the scenes. And I enjoy behind the scenes. I really do want like as much behind the scenes content as possible. So I was like, I saw that title and, your heart jumps and then you're like, oh, it's behind the scenes. But I love behind the scenes. So it was fun. But I wish they'd named it something else. But yes, definitely worth checking out. It's fun to see. And they sort of really, go into the characters, the actors on set and stuff like that. Getting to see everything was really cool.
Yeah. Also on Disney Plus, a series that we've been really, really enjoying and I highly recommend is Light and Magic. This is 6 episodes taking a look behind the people and the history of Industrial Light and Magic, going back to the establishment of that crew for the making of Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, going through all the other original trilogy movies, and then looking at the other titles that they've been key in developing, working with Steven Spielberg and James Cameron in particular.
Yeah, we've still got an episode to go, but we're extraordinarily impressed with this behind the scenes sort of documentary series. We've watched our fair share of sort of Lucasfilm behind the scenes.
Oh, and read the books.
And, all sorts, really dived into as much information. But they do include as much new material, footage that I've never seen.
Footage is cool, but I think the reason
interviews with everyone.
That's what I was about
it's
to say.
all new, fresh interviews with the real people, all the people that were there on set, telling stories that I've never heard.
Dennis Muren, Phil Tippett, and John Dykstra from back in Episode 4. Ken Ralston, and moving on to John Knoll, Doug Chiang, all those guys that are just absolute geniuses when it comes to developing new ways of storytelling and putting material on the screen. Hearing them all of those names speak and tell their stories, it really, it just makes me, it's just lightning in a bottle that they were in the right place at the right time. And George Lucas is obviously instrumental in making that happen.
It even looks like new interviews with George Lucas. Yeah. He is in it talking about the stuff, and it all looks filmed at the same time. This isn't archival stuff that they've just cobbled together and sort of gurgitated out to put more content on Disney Plus. It all looks really fresh, and it's going through it. It's talking like we've gotten up to like the Terminator 2 era leading up to Jurassic Park. Which we're getting into stuff where it's gonna the final one's gonna lead all the way up to the modern day. But we're really, really enjoying just the fresh take and just the sort of the authentic stories, what it really felt like, and it doesn't shy away from showing some of the rifts, the difficulties that people had. They were trying to do things that had never been done before. And obviously sometimes you're going to hit brick walls and that's going to just put in, stress timelines. We know what it must be like making movies to deadlines and to budgets and things like that. So it doesn't shy away from showing some of the struggles that they had that anybody does when achieving something as monumental as what ILM did for the movie making industry. But it does it in a these people are showing it from a perspective. Yeah, they know it was worth it.
Even the people that had to move away, unfortunately, and some of them may have been treated less fairly than others, some of them had to move away from ILM, went on to do other really fantastic and key things in the film industry. And
but I'm glad for that. Doesn't discredit or try and sort of stick things in a corner and just sort of gloss over it, and just go, this person was nasty, so they left and that's all good. It actually has these people telling the stories about why they left ILM, but
these are names that are familiar to all of us that are really looked behind the scenes for Star Wars. And it really just struck me how cool it was hearing them talk about how much they enjoyed it, how much they enjoyed the atmosphere on the whole, environment and the opportunity. Hearing little bits, I obviously know Phil Tippett and Dennis Muren in their roles. I didn't actually realise that they were so close in terms of actual personal friendship as well.
Yeah, at each other's weddings and stuff like that. And seeing the stories from people that aren't as well known, some of the sculptors and some of the people that work in the computer graphics, that aren't sort of, everyone knows Dennis Muren, but they go down the list and find some of the other people that were just as instrumental in their time, but perhaps haven't had just quite the sort of the accolades or the hype or the limelight, yes. And the stories of like Doug Chiang and like how they came along, as teenagers and people that were inspired by Star Wars and how they actually managed to get in the door.
Joe Johnston's the other big name in there that's really got a cool story as well. The way George Lucas actually, when he wanted a bit of a break from just doing storyboards and that level of development, George Lucas sent him to film school to UCS.
Paid for his fees and kept him on.
Gave him a half salary.
Gave him a half salary so he could do it. And he's a successful director now, and he was talking about, that was such a once in a lifetime opportunity to do that and further his career, because George Lucas is one of those people that just sort of knows, talent. He could see that there was potential there. And so it's a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, search Light and Magic on Disney Plus.
So there's a lot
if you
of
don't
Star
have Disney
Wars
Plus, you can see it for $1.99. That's a pretty good value.
A lot of Star Wars there. Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, if you're into those things as well. It was really cool seeing John Dykstra and as he moved away from Star Wars and into Battlestar Galactica and the model making.
And I know it's not directly related, but I think a lot of Star Wars fans are sci-fi fans in general. I was quite intrigued by how much behind-the-scenes footage of Terminator 2 I hadn't seen before. How they kind of created...
Robert Patrick painted up with a grid on his body before we had that sort of modern-day version of motion capture.
Really digging into how they did that leap from the water tentacle in Abyss to creating, the liquid metal Terminator in T2. It was fascinating, not like this is going beyond Star Wars, but that was really cool if you enjoy behind the scenes of just movie making in general. Some really good stuff.
Okay, so we talked about the release schedule for everything we know about over the coming 12, 18 months. Notable by its absence was Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie, which we now know won't be shooting at all this year. Taika's been recently heard to say when talking to The Wrap that he is still trying to figure out what the story is. Not this year. I mean, I'm going to be in New Zealand. He has been since August, he says, until the end of the year with Our Flag Means Death and Time Bandits. And during that time, I'll still be writing. I'm still trying to figure out what the story is. Interesting reference to Our Flag Means Death there. And I think this is quite relevant and pertinent to Kiwis. Taika's movie we're obviously quite excited about because it's really, really fun to hear about the involvement of other Kiwis in Star Wars material, particularly at this level. And it's interesting that Our Flag Means Death was originally produced overseas. I think, I want to say, don't quote me on this, I want to say Burbank, California, but possibly even some in Sydney. Again, don't quote me on that, but I do know for certain that Our Flag Means Death has been moved in its production almost in entirety to New Zealand. So there's a non-zero chance that there'll be some Star Wars material that might even take place in production at some level in New Zealand, because Taika seems to be wanting to be doing more work here rather than having to be forced to be locked down in other places around the planet for productions. He still sees New Zealand very much as his home base. He also spoke to Rolling Stone about his Star Wars movie, and he said, "But I feel like, for me, I'm never going to please the fans. I don't want to mess with something that's so treasured. Also, you feel like you've got to do a lot of research, and I don't have a lot of time. I mean, there's thousands of books that have been written, those volumes of books about Star Wars with all the characters. I just don't have time to go through all of them. So I can't say, confidently I'll be able to do something that's, very close to what everyone knows. I'm not promising that I'm going to do anything like that. I'm just saying it'll be easier for me not to do that." So what is he saying there? I think he is basically saying, if you sum it up, that the film story he's going to be looking at won't be using existing characters. He doesn't want to get tripped up with past continuity. He wants to, obviously, things to fit in with the real world, and we know he can do that because he has done so with some of the other material that he's handled, Marvel and Thor, for instance. But he wants to do something fresh that gives them a little bit of room just to tell a story without getting caught up too much in what has come before. He goes on to say on that topic, if you go too far away from everything that we've known, why is it even Star Wars? Why not just make a fresh science fiction movie? You know what? Whoever said that is actually probably right. Now that I think about it, as you were saying, I was like, yeah, if you take away all of the Star Wars stuff, it's not Star Wars. So he retracted a little bit there, saying that it's not going to be too far away from what we already know. But I think it still all boils down to wanting to fit into the Star Wars universe without being too much tied down with the backstory of existing characters. He says, if it's not right, it's not right. If it's not ready, it's not ready. With Star Wars, I don't want to rush. It's something I wouldn't want to just leap into and not feel that it's unique. It's my film and it makes sense, because that would be a disaster. I'm writing at the moment, so I'm going to do my best to come up with an idea that everyone loves. And those last few quotes came from the Rolling Stone magazine.
I think it's good that he's actively mentioning Star Wars in his articles. He's not just trying to sort of wave off any questions about it.
It's clear
I like that he's taking a lot of time. Yeah. He knows, obviously with Marvel, there's a lot riding on the Marvel films. You know, it's a big franchise. It's one of Disney's big money makers. They don't want to stuff it up, but they still have to fit within certain boxes in that. There are comics that they're trying to generally follow certain storylines for. This feels like he's got a bit bigger of a sandbox to play in and wants to really make sure that it's
he may have
fits.
felt a bit tied up dealing with characters that were already part of the MCU.
Yes, yeah, that you don't quite have as much free reign. So yeah, I think this would just be interesting. And we know he's creative, but yeah, I think like he's discovering that there is a fine balance between making something that's sort of fresh and unique, but also fits within the same world and the same lore and everything like that. But I feel like, yeah, he's a little bit busy, but Disney is still very, very keen for him to do this project. So it will come and what will happen. Like the Indiana Jones, you know, they sort of talk about, we're working on a script for a few years. And they're like, yes, we found the right script. And then they're filming it. And I'm also very looking forward to that film. But I feel like this is one that I'm very fine to wait, especially if it means that we get a little bit of New Zealand on screen in Star Wars.
Yeah, so
that's worth waiting for.
That's just our speculation and our wishful thinking at this point, but I think it's not unreasonable to
even if it's just a few scenes, like in Rogue One, you know, where they filmed a little bit in London and then they went off to, you know, tropical location to film out there. I think, you know, even it's just like one location that they filmed on, like, you know, film in New Zealand. Yeah. That would be really exciting for us as Kiwi fans.
Speaking of Taika Waititi, of course, there's one other little bit of trivia just to throw into the conversation. We've heard via /film a little bit of information that implies he will be starring in upcoming episodes of Mandalorian Season 3, which we've just previously talked about coming out early next year. I don't know. I don't want to say that that's a spoiler because that would kind of imply that we know what the character is. We don't know what character he's going to play, but we have some hopes based on what he's played before, and we'll see where that potentially goes. But yeah, fun that he is remaining involved in Star Wars at that level. Okay, I have one more D23 Expo reveal that I just want to talk about. This is not relevant to absolutely everybody, but there is a title coming out called Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures. A couple of young actors, Jamal Avery Jr. and Emma Berman, have been cast in this series, which is being described as a preschool series. The description is that Kai Brightstar, a Jedi youngling who hopes to follow in the footsteps of the great Master Yoda and become a Jedi Knight. He teams with pilot Nash Durango on adventures across the galaxy. So this is aimed at the much, much younger age group, much younger audience. It will be premiering in 2023 on Disney Junior and Disney Plus. I think it's interesting, even if you're not going to watch this yourself. We probably will, just out of curiosity. I think Yoda's going to make have a bit of a role. He is featured in the promo material, but I think it is interesting because it speaks to what we were just having a conversation about earlier, about some confusion about where some of these series, animated series in particular, are supposed to head. Who is the intended audience, and the way even Clone Wars evolved over time, and the way Rebels had had a slightly more simplistic artistic style, but some pretty serious story arcs in terms of continuity and the bigger picture. I think they need to be a little more clear about who the audience is, and there's been a bunch of other straight to YouTube type shorts coming from Disney in the Star Wars franchise, but this one here, I think it's got a clear audience, and it's going to help with a bit more clarity about, you know, what's aimed for the younger audience and what's intended to be consumed by, you know, fans, slightly more mature fans, still of all ages, but fans who are more interested in stories that are truly canon. All right, we'll move away from Star Wars titles, Star Wars stories, also from D23 Expo, where they talked about things associated with the parks and other Disney franchises. Came a little bit of interesting news, and it relates to the Disney Cruise Line. The first Disney cruise to sail from New Zealand and Auckland was announced. The Disney Wonder, which originally launched in 1999, that's the name of the boat, the name of the ship, will now set sail from 4 new home ports, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Auckland. For a limited time, you'll be able to cruise from 2 to 6 nights between October 2023 through to February 2024. And the relevance to this podcast is that on these limited time sailings, the ship is the destination, and our amazing Disney Cruise Line crew, the promo material says, can't wait to welcome guests on board as they are immersed in their favourite stories from Disney, Pixar, Marvel and Star Wars. So it's set to sail on October the 28th, 2023, initially departing from Sydney, but there are a number of sailings that depart directly from Auckland. Bookings are open to the general public later next week, a little after next week, September the 29th, 2022. And you can check that out from disneycruise.disney.go.com.
Yes, the Disney Wonder is an older ship, and of course at D23 they announced that Disney is building more cruise ships. They recently launched the Disney Wish. That's their newest sort of headline ship. And obviously cruising is a big deal for Disney, the fact that they're building 2 more. So they're taking one of their older ships and checking out a new sort of locale. So I've always wanted to go on a Disney cruise. They've done Star Wars, elements. Some of them have Star Wars themed areas. So you can actually go on YouTube.
It's a Disney Fantasy that has the Star Wars weekends.
Yeah.
So the theming is quite strong in some instances.
Yeah. But you can check out on YouTube, because this is an older ship. There's lots of videos of people sort of doing tours of the Disney Wonder and stuff like that. So you can see the themed areas, and looking through the current listings for this cruise on the website, they list characters including Rey and Chewbacca. So they have listed there, the characters. They've also listed the Marvel characters that you'll meet, and some of the sort of the themed nights. This is one of the ships that does the pirate night, for kids that sort of, are into sort of pirate themed things and stuff like that. So this is very exciting for people that have always wanted to go. It doesn't have a full themed Star Wars area like some of the ships do, but there will be a Star Wars sort of themed event of some sort and Star Wars characters on board, which is very exciting. And based on the sort of the itinerary, it looks like it kind of travels in a loop between sort of Auckland, Sydney,
Melbourne,
Brisbane, and then sort of back around. So it'll just sort of travel in a loop. And for the initial sort of cheapest option, it looks like this will run between $1,200 to $1,300 per person. That's in New Zealand dollars for sort of based on a double occupancy room, because most cabins are designed for 2 people. They do go all the way up to cabins that can sleep 7 if you're a particularly big family. Most of the mid-tier range ones have like pull-down beds so that you can sleep children in the same room, so you can take along a whole family of, 2 or 3 kids as well. So if you've got a Disney family that enjoys Star Wars, this is definitely something to look out. There is no indication at this point whether they will repeat this. Obviously, this is over the summer months for us here down under. This might just be a test to see how well they can do. Cruise ships are a fairly common thing in New Zealand, but we just never had a Disney one here. So I'm very excited that they have finally brought one of their classic ships. The ship has a passenger capacity of 2,700. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. It's not the biggest ship in the Disney fleet, but that's a pretty reasonable ship. And so if you've always wondered about cruising, generally you have to fly somewhere to sort of jump on a Disney cruise. Most of the time that's Florida. So you're already paying sort of, $1,000 or $2,000 to get there before you've even started their cruise. Disney cruises are all inclusive. So you do get excursion days, at stops and things like that. They're all sort of included, with the exception of there's generally one expensive restaurant that's like an adults only one that's kind of fine dining. That's not included in the price, but Disney cruises, the standard, your food and things like that are all included in the price. So $1,200 to have a Disney adventure with some Star Wars characters on a cruise.
Yeah, so the Disney Wonder didn't historically have a lot of Star Wars theming, but they are advertising specifically that it now does and will do so for these Auckland departures. And I think that's what makes it the most relevant to this conversation. And as you say, it's probably a bit of a test with them having a couple more ships under construction now. There's a chance that the older ships, the smaller ships, will do this circuit on an ongoing basis. And if they're adding some Star Wars characters now to this that they didn't previously have, then maybe that will expand. And I don't know. We do know that they have entire Star Wars themed weekends on the cruise ships. I don't know if we'll be quite as lucky as to get that happening down this way at Australasia, but we can hope and wish.
Certainly with the Disney parks, they are very clear about wanting to include classic Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars at all of the sort of levels of Disney. So we're seeing Marvel and Star Wars being added to most, if not all, of the Star Wars parks around the world. They know that these are money-making franchises. When it comes to box office take, Marvel and Star Wars will far outstrip classic Disney animated movies at the box office. Even to a certain extent, Pixar. The Pixar films generally do very well at the box office, but Marvel and Star Wars make a ton of money. So they want to make sure that is close closely tied to Disney. They keep that sort of excitement there, and they know that people are going to spend money. There'll be people that are not that interested in classic Disney, but they will go if there is a Marvel and or Star Wars component to the trip, because that's possibly, tends to hit a little bit more the adult market, and adults are the one that are booking these cruises and spending the money. Kids really, really want to see Mickey Mouse, but grown-ups will pay the thousands of dollars to go on the cruises to meet, the likes of Spider-Man, Thor, and Chewbacca and stuff like that. So I'm very, very excited by this news. Obviously, here in Australasia, we don't get a main park in our vicinity. We've got to go to Asia or the US or Europe, and those are big, expensive trips for most people. So very excited to get a little bit more authentic Disney closer to home. I mean, I even if I don't get the chance to go on a cruise, I'm going to go down to the port and take a photo of a Disney cruise ship in New Zealand, because that is exciting.
You just touched on quite a relevant point, and since in the more recent era, around about the time that Disney purchased Star Wars, the Star Wars franchise, they have actually been expanding in a way to make product, merchandise, experience, everything a little bit more accessible globally. And this is really, really important for New Zealand, because it's actually making, I think it's fair to say we're actually noticing Star Wars stuff becoming a little bit more available in New Zealand. We're getting stuff, quite on time, even in advance of North America on occasion.
Yeah, because of our proximity to the Asian manufacturers. We also recently saw the launch of the Shop Disney Asia website that facilitates New Zealand. Interestingly, they have dropped the shipping costs. It used to be around 45 New Zealand to get shipping from the New Zealand Shop Disney site. They have now introduced a cheaper option that is around the $20 mark. And previously, to get free shipping, you had to spend $150. They have now lowered that to $130. So and they have released new product, including new Star Wars stuff. There is stuff from the recent Obi-Wan Kenobi series there on the Disney,
so
Shop Disney website.
shopdisney.co.nz. It has products that's usually often only available in the Disney parks. But like you say, there was a really cool boxed set of droids from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It's available globally. It was neat to see a specific allocation available for New Zealand, and interestingly / oddly, perhaps erroneously, the pricing for New Zealand was far, far cheaper than the North Americans and UK were able to get that product for, and because it's a smaller market, it's now sold out, but it's actually available for quite a bit longer than it was in US and UK.
So yeah, it does speak to a little bit more of a global perspective from Disney, which bodes well for Star Wars fans, because obviously they do control Star Wars in terms of distribution and merchandising and sort of consumer experiences. I don't think we'll see a theme park in Australasia, but at least we are getting a sort of more of a feel for it closer to home. And I'm really fingers crossed that this might become a regular thing. Cruising tends to be a summertime activity. They can move the cruise ships around because, of course, down under, we are on a different schedule to the northern hemisphere summer. So when the ships don't cruise quite as much for winter, they can just mosey on down here and spend the summer raking in the dollars down here for us fans that don't really get the chance to go to the big theme parks. If you're just a Star Wars fan couple, for about $2,500, you can go spend several days on a Disney cruise and just, have fun. You get to go to Australia, travel around. If you haven't hopped across the ditch in a while, you can go check out Sydney and things like that. So, find a local toy store there and pick up some Star Wars toys on your way. And of course, there is always cruise line specific merchandise. Disney's very keen to get people to go on the cruises for very specific things. I'm not aware if there's Star Wars specific cruise line merch, particularly on the Disney Wonder cruise ship. If you're a Disney fan, you know that the cruise lines have their own exclusive cruise line merch, stuff that you can only get if you go on the cruises. So that's always fun from a general Disney perspective.
Couple of pieces of gaming news that are interesting. The Star Wars Hunters mobile game, we've talked about this previously in the podcast, from developers Zynga. The worldwide launch for this has been delayed to later this year. almost amusing, I fear to say, because it's been available to Kiwis as a test market for quite some time and is still available. So they've delayed making this game available to the rest of the world, but if you're in New Zealand, you can actually download and test this game. Have been able to do so for quite a while. Also on the topic of delays, we were quite keen to hear about the Knights of the Old Republic remake. There was some bad news a little while back, not too far back, that there was going to be significant delays or problems. The remake has been confirmed to be shifting studios to Saber Interactive. It's now been confirmed that the remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is in the hands of Saber Interactive after it faced development issues at Aspire Media. Last month it was revealed that Knights of the Old Republic was going to be postponed indefinitely, so now we know with this transition to another studio that it's going to be revitalized, and we can look forward to hearing more details about when and where we might be seeing this down the line.
It's such a iconic Star Wars video game. I'm really excited that this one is getting sort of
still alive,
properly remade for, the next gen consoles, the full graphics and stuff like that. When you actually boot up the original, I have such fond memories of it, and then it's sort of jarring when you actually boot it up and you're like, oh yes, that's right, this thing is nearly 20 years old. The graphics, the resolution, it's all a bit small. I really want to see this thing. I'm willing to wait just so long as it doesn't get shelved permanently. I'm quite happy to wait to see this thing eventuate.
If it comes to fruition, it'll be really fascinating to see how far they go with it and what sort of comparison can be made between the old one and the new one. We know that it's survived with a decent fan base because of the strong story, and it's been really interesting to see what it will look like with the overlay of sort of modern development, modern graphics and gameplay. One last thing before we move on to talk about product announcements and store reports is a quick update about Armageddon Expo. Armageddon Expo Auckland, which is due to take place late in October, has been in a bit of a limbo, as there's been legal battles, legal conversations taking place about who runs the showgrounds, the Auckland showgrounds in Green Lane. Been a little bit complicated. I won't get into the legal details, but you can read about that in the mainstream media if you're interested. But the short story is that there's two potential managers of this showgrounds, one of which would be turning it largely into a film studio, and the other that wants to keep it operating as a events centre. And that hasn't been locked in yet, so we haven't been able to lock in the Armageddon Expo for October. Armageddon staff have been able to say that they will be getting us a solid update this coming week, possibly tomorrow, Monday, New Zealand time. Fingers crossed that will be the case. If not, it'll be interesting to have to face the reality of Armageddon not taking place in Auckland for these complicated reasons. Having said that, we enjoyed going to Armageddon Expos in both Tauranga and Palmerston North over the past few months. We've enjoyed those slightly smaller venues. They have quite a different feel to the Auckland Armageddon, but they've been starting to gather a little bit more momentum with actual in-person guests showing up and so forth. And obviously, great opportunities. This is the second time Palmerston North has been run, so fans are becoming a little bit more aware of it. We saw vendors selling out their entire stock while they were down there, so there's a lot of an audience for pop culture material, and there's great array of costumes down in both Tauranga and Palmerston North showing up in terms of Star Wars costumes and Star Wars costuming. We enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about product announcements and local store reports. From New Zealand Mint, they've had a month of tuning out an awful lot of Star Wars product. We'll just hit on the most recent ones. A series of 4 Mandalorian poster coins from New Zealand Mint in the 1 ounce silver range. Runs of 2,000 each, featuring Mandalorian, Grogu, Boba Fett and Ahsoka, priced at $208 each. This is a variation on the other coin styles. These are the rectangular coins. A little bit interesting to see something different, and it's also very interesting that they've released an entire set of 4 Star Wars collectibles in one hit. Usually they release new characters in each of the series at a rate of about 1 per month, such as the Chibi coin line, which has been very steady at 1 per month for coming up on a couple of dozen coins now, a couple of dozen characters, the most recent of which is Cad Bane from the Book of Boba Fett. We have had a number of Black Series reveals and vintage collection reveals. No dates as to when we'll get them in New Zealand yet, but these are definitely things to keep an eye out for, and some other interesting sort of Hasbro developments to talk about in association with these. From the Black Series, we're expecting some Andor series. In America, Walmart exclusive Andor referred to as the Aldani mission. This is an Imperial disguise and an Imperial officer. Black Series, sticking with the old windowed boxes. I'll come back to why I'm saying that shortly. Also, Target exclusive Shore Trooper from Andor and Imperial officer from the planet Ferrix, also with windowed boxes. Revealed at San Diego Comic-Con, Grogu with Hover Pram, Migs Mayfeld, X-Wove, HK-87, Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian, and a series of Halloween edition figures, a Clone Trooper and a Wookiee. And with some of these characters, they're moving on to the plastic-less, no windowed boxes. Hasbro sent out an official statement confirming that they'll be keeping the bubble, the plastic bubble, for both the vintage collection and retro collection lines, but the Black Series will be progressively moving to a plastic-free box design. So this means you're getting a box with a picture of the figure on the outside and you cannot see the figure inside. In the official statement from Hasbro talking about the plastic-free packaging, they say that their goal for this move does not include packaging for fan collectible products like the 375 TVC figures, where packaging is part of the product experience and typically retained intact for fan displays and collections. Those lines include vintage and collection and retro collection, as well as other collectible brands such as Marvel Retro and G.I. Joe Retro. But it looks like the Black Series will be moving towards this windowless box design down the line. Probably be seeing those during this year. Vintage Collection reveals a 3.75-inch scaled Boba Fett's Slave Run Starship. It's been revealed. That's styled as seen in the Book of Boba Fett. Comes with a Boba Fett Tython action figure. We're also expecting to see another couple of other TVC figures down the line this year. Cal Kestis from Jedi Survivor, and a Klatooinian, a Raider, and a Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian.
The move to do a windowless version of the Black Series figures is kind of odd. Like, I could kind of see it back in those old black boxes where the boxes themselves weren't that interesting. To me, the figures look more interesting out of those boxes. But the new modern ones with the sort of the cut-off side, with the color coordinated art down the sides, that has really sort of, I'm generally a person that opens the figures, but those boxes look really, really nice, all lined up on a shelf with the art that all lines up, the colors, the way that you could kind of have them at a sliced angle so you could see the character and the art on the side. Looks really, really neat on a shelf. And to be honest, we've actually got a few that we haven't taken out of the packaging for that specific reason. To go to a completely covered box for Black Series, I think is going to annoy a lot of people because it feels like they designed it for you to line all the boxes up on your shelf.
It's the way things have been forever. Here's the other thing. We're already starting to see the downside for this because a couple of TVC, even though the bubbled figures, single figures are going to retain the bubbles, TVC Deluxe figures are coming out in blind boxes. We've seen the Ahsoka with the Morai Convoy and the Navarro Stormtrooper with the E-Web cannon, for instance, coming out in blind boxes. And there was a deluxe Boba Fett as well. And overseas, we've been seeing people open these up to get basically dud figures inside, manufacturing defects that aren't evident until you get them open home and open the packaging.
Yeah.
And people have even speculated, and this is just speculation, of course, is that the fact that they are being thrown into blind boxes means that the QA, the quality assurance in the factories, might even be taking a little bit of a downturn because they know they're not going to show up on the shelves. They're not going to show up until they're in people's hands, and it's too late to do a lot about it.
And the frustrating thing is that these figures, these 4-inch figures in the boxes, are way more expensive here in New Zealand. They're $45.
The whole pricing's gone up.
And I know it's deluxe, but they're not the same amount of plastic as 2 figures, but they're priced like there are 2 figures inside.
Well, exclusive pricing we've talked about a lot, and that's really rearing its ugly head here in New Zealand. The warehouse is getting in some cool figures, and we commend them for that. But Tika, the Jawa, showing up at, what is she, 55? And deluxe.
She's shorter than a figure.
Deluxe Black Series figures at $65 is just a little bit hard to swallow.
Especially in this economy. I know that businesses are suffering the same as regular folk, but these are non-essentials in life. Well, they're fun to have toys.
I feel but it's a real challenge because I love the fact that places like the Warehouse and Farmers are getting these exclusives, but the other thing that's making it really hard, and it's really having a negative effect down the line, is that these exclusive figures, like the deluxe ones and like Tika, And some of the, for instance, metallicized, carbonized figures, they're often shipped in solid cases.
Yes.
So they're quite abundant numbers across the country.
And we're seeing that with some of those deluxe Mando sets that people have been finding on clearance. And it's really irritating if you paid full price, which is getting up towards $70 for some of these deluxe 6-inch figures where the Mando and Baby Yoda are sort of covered in mud. And then they're just like, a third of the price sitting on clearance tables getting banged around because nobody cares because there was way too many of them on shelves.
Yeah.
They brought in too many, they charged too much. And then if you're one of the, loyal people that actually forks out the full price, you end up getting burned and it's gonna have a flow-on effect. Whenever this happens, we end up getting whole waves that don't show up. Because the people that import it just go, look, the stuff is sitting on clearance shelves. Nobody wants it. Let's just give this line a rest for a while. And they don't order in the next waves. And we're going to see it happen again with the Saw Gerrera figure. He is in huge numbers everywhere. Both Farmers and the warehouse, we're seeing him all over the place. But we didn't get the other Rogue One figures from this line.
In New Zealand, yeah.
In New Zealand. So he's gonna end up on clearance tables. I can see
It's
it.
a shame because it's...
But it's even worse knowing that they're probably saving money going to a cardboard box. There's less steps to make a cardboard box than there is to make a cardboard box with a plastic window in it. There's just less manufacturing steps to that and probably less cost. I would assume cardboard costs less than plastic. I don't know the dollars and cents to the packaging, but I feel like, especially with everything just being thrown into a cardboard box and shipped out, we're now paying more for these figures, which we can't see. I always check the paint apps of figures before I buy them. I always, if there is 8 on a shelf, I will look at all 8 before I choose the one that I want to go home with. And now you're just like, well, it's a blind box. I'm just going to take one and hope for the best. It's like, it's a lottery system. And
a couple of things going on there. That the exclusive figures and the pricing on there, that's something's going to have to break there because we will see a cycle of stuff going on to clearance in a challengingly unpredictable way. But the blind boxing again is, I don't know that it's going to be a win for Hasbro in the long run.
And I don't understand why Hasbro is I don't understand why the warehouse is jumping into what is traditionally a collectible market by getting exclusives and then chucking them in the toy aisle along with all the other toys where kids are grabbing at them, the hangers are getting bent and the boxes are just getting dinged. If you're going to pay a premium collectible price, then you expect, like we see from sort of toy stockists overseas, you can pay full price if you want a mint collectible because you intend to keep it in its box, and then they'll knock a few dollars off if you want a less than mint packaging because you're probably going to open it and you don't really care. You'll save a few dollars if you get a scuffed or banged up box. There's no such deal in New Zealand. What is on the hanger is what you've got to choose, and it's one price. And then sometimes you can get it during a toy sale at 20% off. But if the warehouse is going to get into the collectible market, put these toys over by the video games where they used to put things like some of the Funkos when they used to do that. And they've got some of the gaming kind of collectibles like the LED lights and stuff like that. They've got some of the stores have like a collectible section. These toys need to be there because they're not toys. How many parents are buying a $45 Stormtrooper action figure and giving it to their kid to rip open and play with? There's not that many. They buy those $10 tube figures or the $10 ones from Kmart in the cardboard boxes. Those are going to kids, not $45. They're going into the hands of collectors, but you can't even check the paint. Sorry, that's a rant, but it's frustrating. As a collector, there is such a bombardment of stuff out there that you have to really think long and hard about which pieces you're going to buy and what do you leave. And it's becoming a gamble. Do you buy it now or that it might sell out? You want something nice, case fresh, or do you just sit on your hands knowing that it's going to end up battered on the clearance table in 3 weeks?
So the take-home message is that we'll still see the plastic involved in the packaging for TVC and retro collection lines, but we'll be seeing this change for Black Series. I mean, it's an odd distinction, and I don't know how that's going to pan out in the long run, but I don't think it's going to be... I don't think it's going to be great. I don't think they're going to be quite as attractive seeing these blind boxes on the shelves. Let's discuss something a little bit more positive. We've previously talked about the Jazzwares Micro Galaxy Squadron Spaceships line. Now, this was a cool line when we heard about it, and the main thing that defines this line of collectibles is that all of the spaceships and figures are in scale to each other. So your speeders, your speeder bikes, or so forth, are tiny when you're compared to the giant Millennium Falcons and troop transports and things like that. And that's a really novel approach, and I think it's a really attractive for collectors who want to display these things together. We speculated, we hoped that they might show up in New Zealand, and in fact it's transpired that they have. They've just shown up in the last week all around the country, particularly at the warehouse, but also at branches of the Toy World. Now, because everything's in everything's in the same scale, so a different physical size, these collectibles are broken down into a number of different categories, a number of different classes, and they're priced differently. So the whole range that's available currently in New Zealand is as follows. In the Assault class, the largest class, you've got a $99 battery-operated Millennium Falcon with sounds and lights, and that looks like quite a nice vehicle, actually. We're going to have a review of that over on our personal blog site, Villa Varakino, on our YouTube channel there and website. So we'll put links through to that when we have that available, but very shortly. Next size down is the Starship class. So far this involves in New Zealand the Slave One, Boba Fett's Starship. It's supposed to also include the Razor Crest. I'm not sure if those are retailer exclusives in the US, and we're going to get that later, or that might be the one vehicle that we're missing out on at this point. So we'll have to hold hopes that we'll see that locally. That line, that range, that class is priced at $65 each. Each of these vehicles comes with an array of little figures, about 1 inch in size, and there are some variants and exclusives for some of the vehicles, which sometimes involves a difference in the vehicle, but sometimes a difference in the number of pack-in figurines. The Razor Crest, which, as I just to reiterate, hasn't shown up in New Zealand, does come with a exclusive variant, the Arvala 7 version with lots of missing panels. I think that specific version is a retailer exclusive in the US. Next size down is the Transport class, the Imperial Troop Transport for $40, one vehicle in this class. The Starfighter class has a number of different vehicles. A classic X-Wing. The standard version has Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing pilot gear. The Chase version has a Jedi version of Luke Skywalker in his black robes. The Chase versions are quite limited, so if you see them, you're pretty lucky. Some of them are limited to 5,000 a number, some of them to 15,000 a number, but that's globally. So if you see them locally, that's quite something to get hold of. Obi-Wan's Jedi Starfighter is also in the Starfighter class. Darth Vader's TIE Fighter and Moff Gideon's Outland TIE Fighter. That line there is priced at $35 each. Next size down is the Light Armor class, features the AT-ST, Standard Return of the Jedi version. The Chase variant is the Mandalorian version, the Raider version of the AT-ST. We have a TIE Fighter. We also have a Chase variant White TIE Fighter. It's coloured in white to match the vintage die-cast TIE Fighter look from Kenner back in the late 70s. And interestingly, we've also seen something from the Clone Wars here in Asajj Ventress's Jinvex Starfighter. That line is priced at $25 each. And finally, in the smallest size, we have the Scout class. These are blind boxed. There are 5 regular vehicles and 3 chases. They include an AT-RT with Clone Trooper, Bloodfin Speeder with Darth Maul, Speeder Bike with Ahsoka, Speeder Bike with Cobb Vanth, Speeder Bike with IG-11, Speeder Bike with Mando, Speeder Bike with Scout, and a Mandalorian version of the Speeder Bike with Scout. That Mando Scout, the IG-11, and the Cobb Vanth are all the chases in this line. They are priced at $10 each. So I hope that makes some sort of sense in terms of describing the different classes. Very, very cool lineup, and interesting to see that many different vehicles hitting New Zealand all at once. I quite like this line.
From the merchandise perspective from Star Wars Celebration, this was one of my highlights, and it was really going to come down to whether it was available in New Zealand or not. We weren't too sure. Sometimes, there's whole lines that just never really make it to New Zealand. So I was so excited to see that these are available in New Zealand, and it's such a widespread retailer like the Warehouse. It does look like the Millennium Falcon is going to be a sought after one. This one is currently listed as sold out on the Warehouse website. Yeah, it does appear to be shipped in sort of cases of 2. Yep. Most places that we checked seem to have 2 of them. Obviously, with the larger box, we're going to get less of them. As we go down in size, we're seeing a lot more on the shelves up until you get to the blind boxes, where there are whole sort of store cases where you can sort of choose your blind boxes. With regards to the chases, the blind boxes, I'm hoping the chase variants are not as rare as the chase variants in the larger boxes, because these are sole ones that they don't exist outside. The chases in the windowed boxes are simply paint app variations, or in the case of the X-Wing, it's just a slightly different figure. It's not like you can't get a TIE fighter. It's just a white TIE fighter as opposed to the more standard grey. With the blind boxes, the only way to get Cobb Vanth on his sort of pod racer type vehicle is by lucking out and getting a chase. So I'm hoping those aren't as sort of hard to find as the other ones. They don't seem to come with any kind of numbered rarity note on it. So I'm hoping they're not as rare.
Yeah, that $35 Starfighter class, I think the chases are limited to $5,000 per vehicle. The light armor $25 class, I think they're $15,000 per vehicle.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of pattern there, it does imply that the blind box chases will be even higher in number than that. But what that means for New Zealand and how many are actually making it into the country, I don't know.
Yeah. This is a particular, most collectibles, there's always yes, I would love to own everything in this line, but, not necessarily be able to afford everything. Or, maybe some of you out there do collect all the Black Series and all the 4-inch figures. This is a line that I think really does lend itself well to, you either want one or two things, or you want all of it. And I'm in the case where I want all of it. I want every single one of these,
it's going to be
including
really
the chase.
Because of that very specific feature of them being scaled the same, sized differently, but scaled the same. They're going to look really neat all together. I mean, the contrast between the small vehicles and the very large vehicles, and them all making sense. The TIE Fighter being the appropriate size for a TIE Fighter attacking the Millennium Falcon. I think it's going to be a really cool display, something we haven't ever seen before.
And the people that love to make dioramas, this is going to be really fun. If you want to do sort of asteroids and things swooping around, I think it'll be really fun. To be sure, the little figures, they do have some pretty odd paint, but they are small.
The TIE Fighters are cute.
Yeah, the figures have got very simple paint apps, but to be honest, the figures are just a little bonus in there, so you can put something in the cockpit of the X-Wings and stuff like that. They're not really visible in many of the other ships. The ships themselves, the ones that we have seen, have very good paint apps, particularly the Millennium Falcon. That one is the standout one in this range for me. I think it looks really cool. It's a really good displayable size. Not too big that you're like, oh, this isn't going to fit on a bookshelf, where am I going to put it? But big enough that it doesn't look like a little Hot Wheels. I know when you get down to the TIE Fighters, they are similar in size to the ones available in the more recently released Hot Wheels range.
Also available in New Zealand at a few different retailers.
Yes. And you can see, and if you go to a Toy World, you can generally find, one of each and compare them in person. But when you get up to the Slave one, that's where you really start to see the differences. It's not quite Hasbro level, but it's much bigger than the Hot Wheels version. And obviously the Millennium Falcon. If you don't really want to buy into the sort of the standard Hasbro 4-inch figure line, those Millennium Falcons are generally quite large. You've got to have a proper shelf. This Falcon is a really good scale for the amount of detail. The paint application looks really great. It's even got lights and sounds if you want to fly it around the living room or spoil your kids and give them a cool light up toy. I think that one's a standout, but I'm definitely wanting to add the rest into my collection. I dare say the blind box will be a bit hit and miss. Trying to get all of them without doubles is going to be next to impossible, but I'm sure the likes of the Star Wars New Zealand Facebook group will be a good point to sort of sell off doubles or trade with friends to try and collect all of those, because I want all of the blind box ones, but I know that that's going to be a bit of a mission there. Eight different vehicles and characters there. I kind of wish they'd just done a big box set. Here's all the speed bikes in one go, Oh,
two packs.
Yeah. Yeah. I know blind boxes sell well. There is blind boxes from all sorts of manufacturers. Funko do little ones.
They do. I mean, there's no denying they sell well. I just hate them personally. They're just not my thing.
I prefer to just, you might be prepared to pay a little bit more, but, the one and done type, I want to walk in, get the thing I want and walk out. It's always a little bit, you can't just buy one blind box because you'll never get the one that you want in your first go. So you got to buy like 3, 5, 10 and then see what you get, and sell off the ones you don't want. So I dare say there might be some of these hitting Trade Me in the coming weeks. That might be the way to go if you're looking for a very specific one. Or you can just try your luck.
Yeah, and buy a whole lot.
So excited to see these in New Zealand. And I think they're an affordable price point for most people.
Apart from the really big ones, $35 and under. All right, rounding out our store reports and product availability reports from Funko, the Christmas/holiday themed Star Wars pop vinyl figures were recently revealed. They have just come up for pre-order at New Zealand retailers. This year, instead of the sort of slightly unsuccessful red and green paint app variants of standard characters, we've seen they're doing a series of snowman, snow droid versions of main characters, and these are quite cool in my opinion. I like them a lot better than previous years of their holiday themed character releases. So we've got Darth Vader, Stormtrooper, R2-D2, Boba Fett, and C-3PO as snowmen or snow droids. And in the pop vinyl figure line, they're priced at about $25 locally. You can get them at $23 from Mighty Ape if you're a Primate member.
Yeah, these are really fun. I like when these are obviously designed to be collectible, the people that are sort of in for the variants and things like that. So I like it when they didn't just sort of cheap out and just do a slightly different paint app. These are full unique sculpts. They've got cute little sticks and carrot details. They're fully sculpted to look like snowmen, snow shapes of these iconic characters. So if you like fun Star Wars products, variant holiday things, this one's definitely one to check out. Even if you just buy one, there's also sort of a box set that has all of them all together if you just want to get them all to display together. I think these are a fun variant. I'm not usually into the special variants, but I really like these ones.
But on that note, that's about it for today's installment. I guess we're done doing talking. If you have any thoughts on topics we discussed today, we're definitely keen to hear them. Leave a comment on the YouTube page or our website page for this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you taking your time to listen to us share our passion for Star Wars. Stay tuned to our website, SWNZ.co.nz, for Star Wars news for New Zealanders and another podcast episode next week. Don't forget you can jump on over to either our Facebook group or the SWNZ message boards to discuss all the latest Star Wars news with other Kiwi fans. Kia ora, kia noho haumaru, thank you for listening and stay safe.
Turou Hawaiki, may the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, go ahead and like the video, check out the SWNZ Podcast playlist for our other episodes, and subscribe for alerts about new episodes. See you next time.